It didn't start with a fight. It didn't even start with her leaving. It started with a message. One stupid notification on her phone that I wasn't even supposed to see. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was just grabbing her phone from the couch because mine was charging and it buzzed. One glance. That was all it took to unravel 6 years of my life. The message was short. Can't stop thinking about last night. My heart didn't just drop. It crashed. I stared at it, trying to convince myself there was some explanation. Maybe it was an old friend joking. Maybe I misunderstood. But when she walked into the room and saw me holding her phone, her face said it all. She froze like she'd been caught stealing, and in that silence, I knew. I knew I wasn't enough for her anymore. I wish I could say I yelled, demanded answers, threw her betrayal in her face, but I didn't. I just stood there, my throat dry, my legs shaking. She sighed, like I was the one exhausting her, and said, "Ben, we need to talk." That line, like a knife, cutting through the last bit of hope I had. That night, she packed a bag. No big fight, no crying, just gone. And the next day, I found out who he was. Some guy she met at her coworker's party. A guy who, according to her, made her feel alive. Alive. As if the years we spent together were some kind of slow death she needed to escape. I couldn't eat for days, couldn't sleep. I turned into a shadow, replaying every moment, every conversation, wondering what I missed. And just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, 2 months later, I saw the photos online. Her with him, her belly already showing. She was building a new family while I was crumbling into pieces. 2 years have passed since that day, and I thought I'd buried it. I thought I'd buried her. But last week, life decided to dig up the grave. I wasn't supposed to see her again. Honestly, I'd spent 2 years convincing myself she didn't exist anymore. I changed everything. My job, my routines, even the places I went. Because I couldn't stomach the idea of running into Marlene and being reminded of how easily I was replaced. But life has this twisted sense of humor. It was an ordinary Saturday, and I went to the mall just to pick up a pair of sneakers. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for her. And yet, there she was. She was standing near the fountain with a toddler holding her hand. A boy who had his mother's eyes. I swear for a split second my brain couldn't process it. The world around me blurred, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She turned, her eyes locking with mine, and the color drained from her face. She froze, like she'd just seen a ghost. And maybe she had. Because I wasn't the man she left. I wasn't even sure I was a man anymore. I was just hollow. I wanted to look away, to walk past her and pretend I didn't care. But I couldn't move. She whispered something to the kid, and I saw his tiny hand grip hers tighter, as if he could sense the storm brewing between us. She took a hesitant step toward me, and my chest tightened with a mix of anger, sadness, and something I didn't want to admit, longing. "Ben," she said, her voice low, almost shaky. Hearing her say my name again after all this time was like reopening a wound I'd spent years trying to heal. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at her, every memory flooding back. The betrayal, the nights I couldn't sleep, the humiliation of knowing she'd moved on while I was stuck drowning. She looked down at the boy, then back at me. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said, almost like it was a confession. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would cut her the way she cut me, but nothing came out. I was frozen too. And then, just as suddenly as it started, she turned around and walked away. No goodbye, no explanation. But the look on her face told me something I couldn't ignore. There was fear there. Not just guilt, not just awkwardness. Fear. And that single moment set my mind spinning. Why would she be afraid of me? What was she hiding? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the encounter over and over. And for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't just sad. I was curious. I was angry. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I thought seeing her would break me again, but it did something worse. It woke up this gnawing, restless curiosity that wouldn't let me breathe. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her expression at the mall. It wasn't just shock. It wasn't just guilt. It was as if she was terrified that I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to. I spent hours lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with every possible reason. Was it because she still felt guilty about leaving me? Or was it something darker, something she was hiding from everyone? By the next morning, I'd convinced myself I needed answers. I hadn't thought about her life for 2 years, not really, but now I was desperate to know. So I did something I promised myself I would never do again. I looked her up. Her social media was mostly private, but not entirely. A few recent photos, some tagged posts from friends. And that's when I saw it, a photo of her and that man, the one she left me for. He was smiling, holding their son, but something about him, I don't know. Maybe it was just my bitterness, but he looked like the kind of guy who enjoyed winning at someone else's expense. As I scrolled through the fragments of her new life, I found something that didn't sit right. A comment from one of her friends said, "I still can't believe everything you went through and how strong you are now." What did that mean? What did she go through? She looked fine in all her pictures, living this perfect life she chose over me. So, why did that comment feel like a clue, like a thread I needed to pull? I know how pathetic this sounds. I'm not proud of it. But by the next day I was driving near the neighborhood I heard she'd moved to. I didn't plan on seeing her. I just needed to know if she was real, if she was happy. Maybe if I saw her living her perfect life with my own eyes, I could finally let it go. I parked near a cafe and sat there, just staring at the street. And that's when I saw them, her, the guy, and the kid. For a moment, I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. They looked like a family, my family that never was. But then, something strange happened. I saw her glance over her shoulder, like she was paranoid, like someone was watching her. It wasn't me. She didn't know I was there. It was something else. Something about her body language made my stomach knot. I left before she could see me, but the image of her looking over her shoulder stuck in my head like a hook I couldn't shake off. And by that night, I had this horrible feeling. Maybe she wasn't just afraid of me. Maybe she was afraid of him. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just projecting all my bitterness onto her new life. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't leave me. It was like seeing her at the mall had ripped open a part of me I didn't even realize was still bleeding. For 2 nights straight, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, pale, startled, almost scared, and I kept replaying that tiny glance over her shoulder. It wasn't casual, it was sharp, quick, like someone who has learned to always expect something coming from behind. On the 3rd day after the mall incident, I broke. I don't know what possessed me, but I decided I needed to know more. It wasn't about winning her back. I knew that was impossible. I think it was about answers, about closure. Or maybe I just wanted to know if I was right about him, the guy who took everything from me. So I did something I'm not proud of. I reached out to an old friend of hers, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Denise, and she had always liked me, or at least pretended to. We met for coffee, and I pretended I just wanted to know how Marlene was doing. At first, Denise was polite, casual, but when I mentioned Marlene's husband, yes, they were married now, I saw something flash in her eyes. She hesitated before speaking, like she was trying to decide if she should even say anything. She's okay, Denise said slowly. I mean, as okay as she can be. Things weren't easy for her after she left you. It wasn't all what she expected. I didn't know what she meant, but I didn't want to push too hard. I just nodded, pretending to understand. Then she said something that hit me like a sledgehammer. "Look, Ben, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but you should know. He's not the guy you think he is. He's different when no one's looking." I left that coffee shop with 1,000 questions swirling in my head. What did that mean? Was she trying to warn me about him? About Marlene? I kept telling myself it wasn't my business anymore, but deep down, I knew I wasn't going to stop now. I needed to know if Marlene was okay, even if she didn't deserve me caring anymore. Later that week, I drove by that neighborhood again. I parked far enough away not to be noticed, but close enough to see the house I knew was hers from the photos. I sat there like some sad, pathetic detective, waiting for something. Anything. And then, I saw it. Marlene came out with her son, but she wasn't smiling. She wasn't glowing with happiness like the woman in her photos. She looked nervous, scared. And when her husband came out behind her, holding the car keys, I saw the way her shoulders stiffened. It wasn't love. It wasn't even comfort. It was something darker. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. Something was wrong in that house. Something I couldn't ignore. I told myself I wasn't going to get involved. I repeated it over and over like some pathetic mantra. It's not your problem, Ben. She made her choice. She left you. It's over. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake that hollow, gnawing feeling that something was terribly off. Every memory I had of Marlene before she left me, her laughter, her lightness, didn't match the pale, guarded woman I saw outside that house. She used to be impossible to ignore, the kind of person who lit up a room without trying. But now, she looked like she was trying not to be seen at all. 3 days after I saw them again, I cracked. It was late on a Thursday, and I couldn't sleep, so I drove to that neighborhood again, telling myself I'd just pass by, just take one last look and let it go. But as I was about to leave, I saw their car pull out of the driveway. Something in me snapped. Before I knew it, I was following them. I stayed 2 cars behind, trying to look casual, though my heart was pounding like I was doing something illegal, which, in a way, I guess I was. They drove to a restaurant on the other side of town, one of those cozy family places with string lights outside and music playing on the patio. I parked across the street, my hands trembling, watching them through the windshield. Here's the thing that got me. Marlene wasn't smiling, not once. He was talking to her, animated, leaning across the table like he owned her. But she kept her eyes down, nodding occasionally, her hands fidgeting with the napkin. There was a moment when he reached across the table to grab her wrist, not roughly, but not gently either. My stomach twisted. I could feel anger boiling in my chest, this insane urge to storm in there and do something. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching like the miserable ghost of her past. When they left the restaurant, I stayed back, keeping my headlights off until they turned down their street. I don't know why I couldn't stop. I guess part of me was searching for proof that what I was seeing wasn't just in my head. That night, I parked half a block away from their house, waiting. I told myself I'd just watch for a minute, but then I saw something I'll never forget. Through the living room window, I could see him pacing while Marlene stood near the couch, arms crossed. He said something I couldn't hear, but his body language, it was aggressive, not yelling, but sharp, like he was scolding her. Then he slammed his hand down on the table, and Marlene flinched so hard I felt it in my own bones. I don't know how long I sat there after that, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I felt sick, and all I could think was, she's trapped. Maybe she thought she'd traded up when she left me, but now she looked like a prisoner in her own home. And I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, I was the only one who could help her. I drove home that night shaking, my mind racing. I knew this wasn't the end. Something was pulling me toward her again, something bigger than my pride or my anger. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I barely slept that night. I kept seeing that moment, his hand slamming on the table, Marlene's body jerking like she'd been hit, even though he hadn't touched her. I lay there staring at the ceiling, realizing I couldn't just watch this happen. It didn't matter that she left me, or that she broke me in ways I'm still trying to recover from. None of that mattered when I saw her looking like that. I used to love her. Hell, maybe I still do in some twisted, broken way. And if something bad was happening in that house, I couldn't just pretend I didn't see it. The next morning, I started digging. I knew his name, Scott, so I typed it into every corner of the internet I could find. It didn't take long to see that his polished, smiling face wasn't the whole story. A few public records showed up, and I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw an old charge for disorderly conduct. It wasn't recent, but it wasn't ancient either. It made my stomach knot even tighter. I kept going, searching his name in forums, in comment sections, even on social media. That's when I found something I couldn't ignore. A thread on a local community page where someone had complained about a guy losing it in a parking lot and screaming at a woman. They didn't name him, but the description matched Scott perfectly. His car, his height, even the tattoo on his forearm I'd seen that night at the restaurant. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe I was connecting dots that weren't there because I wanted to believe Marlene was suffering for leaving me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I remembered the way she flinched, the way she barely looked up when he spoke. That wasn't the Marlene I knew. Later that evening, I drove past their house again. It was getting dark and their lights were on. I parked farther away this time, not wanting to risk being seen. Through the window, I saw Marlene sitting on the couch alone, her head resting in her hands. I wanted to run to the door, to tell her I knew something was wrong and I'd help her, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, useless, watching from the shadows like a coward. That's when something unexpected happened. She got up, walked to the window, and for a second, it felt like she was looking right at me. My breath caught in my throat. She couldn't possibly see me from that distance, but the look on her face, It was almost like she was silently asking for help. And then the front door opened and Scott stepped outside. I ducked down in my seat so fast I almost hit my head on the steering wheel. He stood there for a moment, looking around, like he felt someone was watching. I held my breath until he went back inside. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would break through my ribs. When I finally drove home that night, my hands were still shaking. I couldn't stop thinking about that look on Marlene's face. I couldn't stop thinking about what Denise had said, that things hadn't been easy for her. I knew I was about to cross a line I might never come back from, but something inside me had already made the decision. I wasn't just going to watch anymore. I was going to find out exactly what was happening in that house, no matter what it took. By the next weekend, I was already in too deep to stop. I told myself I just needed one clear answer, something that would either confirm my suspicions or prove that I was just clinging to a broken past. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to let it go, not after what I'd seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Marlene sitting there on that couch, her face pale, her shoulders tense, like she was living under constant threat. It made me feel sick. I hated Scott. I hated him with a rage I didn't even know I was capable of. He had taken her from me, and now it looked like he was breaking her too. I started planning, not something dramatic, at least not at first. I told myself I'd just watch, just gather proof. Like I was some kind of private investigator rather than a pathetic ex-husband who couldn't move on. That Friday night, I parked in the shadows near their street. I had a notebook with me, which made me laugh at myself for how insane it all looked, but I kept it anyway. I started jotting down times when the lights went on and off, when they left, when they returned. It felt ridiculous, but it also gave me this strange sense of control. Around 9, I saw him leave the house alone. I recognized his car instantly. I had no idea where he was going, but curiosity ate me alive, so I followed him. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel, my heartbeat pounding every time I thought he might notice me. He drove to a bar, not surprising, but what happened there made my blood boil. From the parking lot, I could see through the front window. Scott wasn't alone for long. A woman sat next to him at the bar, and the way he leaned in, smiling, his hand brushing her arm, it didn't take a genius to see what he was doing. My stomach twisted in a knot. Not only was he hurting Marlene, but he was cheating on her too. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it would snap in my hands. For a split second, I imagined walking into that bar, grabbing him by the collar, and letting him know exactly what I thought of him. But I didn't. I stayed frozen in my car like the same coward I'd always been. Instead, I drove back to their house. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought I could warn her, or maybe I just wanted to see her face when she realized who she married. When I parked a few houses down, their living room light was still on. I saw her pacing, talking on the phone. She looked upset, her free hand tangled in her hair, pulling it back like she was trying not to scream. I don't know what possessed me, but I got out of the car. My legs were trembling as I walked up the street. Every step felt heavier than the last, my brain screaming at me to turn back. By the time I reached her gate, I just stood there, staring at the door like an idiot. I wanted to knock, to tell her everything, but I froze. I didn't know what she'd say if she saw me there. Maybe she'd slam the door in my face. Maybe she'd call the cops. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd let me in. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. A shadow moved behind her window, tall and fast. My heart lurched. He was back. I hadn't seen him leave the bar, hadn't even noticed the time, but somehow Scott was there again. I didn't have time to hide. He opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, his eyes scanning the street. For a brief second, I thought he saw me. I ducked behind the neighbor's fence, holding my breath, my pulse hammering in my throat. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about watching anymore. I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. If I didn't make a decision soon, either to walk away or to confront this head-on, I knew I was going to get dragged into something I might never crawl out of. And God help me, I think part of me wanted that. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. I just sat in my apartment staring at the wall, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I kept thinking about that look on Marlene's face, the fear, the way she avoided his eyes. And I realized I couldn't live with myself if I just walked away. For all the pain she caused me, for all the nights I spent wondering why I wasn't enough, I still cared about her. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was the last piece of my heart refusing to let go. But I knew what I had to do. The next day, I went back to her neighborhood. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I parked right in front of the house, walked up to the door, and knocked. My legs were shaking so badly I thought they might give out, but I stayed there. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the door creaked open, and there she was, Marlene. Her eyes widened when she saw me, like she couldn't believe I was real. "Ben," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make this all make sense, but all I could manage was, "We need to talk." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, and for a second I thought she'd slam the door. But instead, she stepped outside, closing it behind her. We stood there in silence, the air between us heavy with years of unspoken words. Finally, I told her everything. How I'd seen them at the mall, how I noticed the way she looked, how I'd followed them, how I'd seen Scott with that woman at the bar. I expected her to be angry, to tell me to mind my own business, but she didn't. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how you saw it," she said, her voice breaking. "But you're right. Things with him, they're not what I thought they'd be. I made a mistake, Ben. I thought I'd find happiness, but I've been living in fear for so long. I didn't know who to turn to. That was it. The wall between us cracked, and for the first time in years, I saw the woman I used to love, standing there vulnerable, lost. I told her she didn't have to stay with him, that she wasn't trapped, and I swear, I saw something change in her eyes when I said that. Like maybe she'd been waiting for someone to remind her she still had a choice. What happened next felt like something out of a dream. That very night, while Scott was out, she packed a bag for herself and her son. I waited in my car down the street, ready to step in if anything went wrong. When she came out, carrying her little boy in her arms, I got out and helped her. She didn't say much, just looked at me with this mix of gratitude and disbelief. We drove in silence for a while, heading nowhere in particular, just away. Finally, she turned to me and said, "Thank you, Ben, for not turning your back on me. I don't know what's next, but I don't feel so alone anymore." That night, I dropped her off at her sister's house, a safe place where I knew Scott wouldn't go looking. As I watched her walk inside, holding her son, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a strange, fragile sense of peace. It wasn't about getting her back. It wasn't about revenge. It was about knowing I did the right thing. A week later, she filed for separation. She called me after, just to say thank you again. We're not together, and maybe we never will be. But that's not what matters. What matters is that she's safe, that her son is safe, and that I finally let go of the anger that's been poisoning me since the day she left. In the end, maybe I'm not the pathetic, broken man I thought I was. Maybe I'm just someone who still believes in doing the right thing, even when it hurts. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can finally start living again.